Young Turks, huge show ahead for you guys. I need you to buckle up. I need Trump and others to brace for impact. So a little bit later in the program, Donald Trump with his backpedal on the NRA. It's hilarious. You're gonna love it. And the Mr. Magoo controversy. Too good. Furthermore, later in the program, we're gonna try to deport Melania Trump. I'm starting that movement. She is an illegal alien. I'll explain, and I'll explain why it's relevant in today's news. Okay, so I'm not playing around today. By the way, speaking of not playing around, after the Young Turks today, Rebel headquarters, where we will have a guest on who has tried to ban male masturbation. Interesting. Okay, she is a progressive, and even though she introduced that bill, you're actually gonna love her. Okay, I'll explain later. Let's go over here. Now, Alex Jones has received considerable criticism for, first of all, everything, as he should. He's a lunatic, makes a wild conspiracy theories about pig, bear, human hybrids. And on top of that, he's deeply anti-Semitic. Now, why do I say that? For a number of reasons. He has attacked George Soros over and over again with references to his background. He attacked Michael Wolff, who wrote the book about Donald Trump. They both happen to be Jewish. You'll see it in a second as well, says that Soros worked with the Nazis. It's just like, to say someone who, I don't know if you know that Soros survived the Holocaust. Like, so Alex Jones is the worst guy on earth. Anyway, we're gonna get to what happened today in a second. But in his midst of his lunatic attacks against Americans of Jewish descent, he started with Michael Wolff, this is a little while back, and to just give you some context. And he said, oh, Michael Wolff, he looks bad, and then he put up a picture of Brian Stelter and started railing on him and saying that he looks like Michael Wolff and they're all the same. Now, as it turns out, Brian Stelter is not Jewish, but of course, Alex Jones, once he gets worked up, he doesn't know. He's like, look at him. So in fact, here, let's show you the video.
But just look at Stelter again, put him on screen. I think this all the broadcast should be is just a photo of Stelter smiling. Oh my gosh, oh, hell on earth.
Seems like a perfectly fine picture to me. Why? Michael Wolff and Brian Stelter, and look at them and hell on, why? Okay, but we're just getting warmed up. Remember this?
He wants to run your life. He wants to control every aspect of your life because he knows he is a cowardly, degenerate sack of anti-human trash. I pledge before my heavenly Father that I will resist them every way I can. These people are the literal demon spawn of the pit of hell. Look at him. And you know what? He is better than you if you keep letting him run your life. He runs your kids. He runs the schools. He runs the banks. This guy, this spirit, this smiling, leering devil that thinks you can't see what he is your enemy. Period. All the narcissistic, devil-worshipping filth. I see you, enemy. I see you, enemy. Enemy, enemy. You are my enemy. And I swear total resistance to you with everything I've got.
So look, it's hard not to be amused by this literal lunatic on air ranting and raving when he should be in a straitjacket. But the things he's saying are not funny. They're the most anti-Semitic things I have ever heard in American media. He ticked off almost every single trope used to attack Jews in history across the world. Anti-human trash, dehumanize them. Demon spawn, references to devil worship, filth. I mean, this is fascism 101, Nazi 101. He's controls your kids, a reference to kids, which he's gonna make worse in a second with blood libel. And he runs the banks. Brian Stelter, it works in media. Why would he run the banks? Because that is the most classic trope against Jews in history. So he's going off on Soros and Wolff and Stelter and these people, they're filth, they're trash, and he promises his heavenly Father that he's going to rout out the enemy. I've seen this movie before, except the guy had a little mustache right here when he was saying it. So now, today, he is going to defend himself, and he says, no, it's okay. I'm not anti-Semitic. Well, I am very curious to see what this defense is going to be. Whew, buckle up.
Soros is a Nazi collaborator that helped round up thousands of his fellow Jews, and then he has groups saying, I'm a Nazi collaborator when he's a Nazi. I mean, it just shows how reprobate and bankrupt the leftists are. And Soros is a Nazi collaborator that helped round up thousands of his fellow Jews, and then he has groups saying, I'm a Nazi collaborator when he's a Nazi. I mean, it just shows how reprobate and bankrupt the leftists are. And she's my ex-wife now. And, you know, it's my new wife, her pedigree's German, 3/4 German from Omaha, and a quarter Irish, and I'm proud of that background. And the anti-Semites call her Jewish and everything else. And if she was, I'd be proud of it. But no, she's got a noble nose, but she's not Jewish. So, you know, that's what all this comes down to, ladies and gentlemen, and it just is insane.
Oh, double face palm. Your defense of why you're not anti-Semitic is my wife has a big nose, but she's not Jewish. You just said that Jews have big noses, and it is not a defense to, like, he couldn't even say some of my best friends are Jewish. He couldn't say my wife is Jewish. He couldn't say any of that. He had no defense. He said my wife's not Jewish, but she has a big nose like the Jews. Oh my God, that's the worst defense I have ever heard in my life. But he thinks nailed it. Look, if you weren't clear about the tropes, I'm gonna give you one more from the Brian Stelter rant. I mean, again, it's the worst thing I've ever seen. This guy, and by the way, if you notice in the beginning there, he called George Soros a Nazi collaborator. Of course that's not true. Of course he's not. And Soros was a kid at the time. The guy survives the Holocaust. And this clown, and I'm trying not to use worse words against him, but he has more than earned it, then turns around and calls a Holocaust survivor a Nazi collaborator. And then he says this about Stelter.
Disingenuous, fake, false, broke back, twisted, a defiler, a betrayer, a backstabber, a devil. You will pay. Yeah, you think I don't see your face, scum? You don't think I don't see you, Stelter? I see you, you understand me? I know what you think of me and my family. I see you right back. You understand that? You understand that, Stelter? Stelter, you will fall. You will not bring humanity down. God is going to destroy you. Get him off the screen. Oh God, they're so evil. Just please, God, free us from them. They're drunk on our children's blood, for God's sake. Okay, I'm gonna stop right now.
Wow, just in case he hadn't finished the complete list of anti-Semitic tropes, broke back, you know, that's a reference to them leading a deviant lifestyle. Again, exactly what the Germans said back in the 1930s, a defiler, a betrayer, a backstabber, classic anti-Semitic trope. God will destroy you, as they said back then as well. And then finally, he almost forgot blood libel. So they're gonna drink your kid's blood. Who's they? Gee, I wonder who they is. Can't quite tell, but it's okay because his wife has a big nose like Jews. Look, what Hitler did obviously speaks for itself and is the worst of the worst. But if you did a Hitler speech and that speech, are you sure Hitler's was worse? Just speeches. Because I don't know that Hitler hit every single trope in a matter of 60 seconds. I don't know that he looked as crazy as that. He looked pretty crazy. And obviously he was crazy and did the worst things imaginable. But the fascists are here. And so I know we kid around about it because he's such a lunatic. But the president listens to this fascist. So it's not funny anymore. Okay. Now let's go to something. Let's go to the president. And look, I mean, pick him, right? That guy's a lunatic in a different way. This president's a lunatic in a different way. Now, this is a lighter story, but it does get to a very heavy issue, a serious issue as well. Okay, so the president is on a warpath against his own attorney general, Jeff Sessions, already maniacal, and then he's going to take it to a different level today, at least in stories that were broken today. I'm going to get to that in a second, but first I'm going to give you some background. As you might have seen this week, Donald Trump tweeted, "Why is Attorney General Jeff Sessions asking the Inspector General to investigate potentially massive FISA abuse?" Because that's what the Inspector General, if there is abuse, is supposed to investigate. And in fact, Sessions is trying to help you investigate something that is not necessarily an actual scandal at all. And he says at the end of the tweet, "Isn't the Inspector General an Obama guy? Why not use Justice Department lawyers?" And he says in big capital letters, Trump says about Sessions, "Disgraceful. I have never seen a president call his own attorney general graceful. No one has, because it's a crazy thing to do. If you think your attorney general is disgraceful, you should fire him instead of tweeting publicly." Okay, and they asked Jeff Sessions about it. Normally he doesn't strike back, but this time he had to answer because this is so unreal, over the top. He said, "As long as I am the attorney general, I will continue to discharge my duties with integrity and honor, and this department will continue to do its work in a fair and impartial manner according to the law and the Constitution." In other words, no, I'm not going to cover for you when we're going to follow the law here. I can't believe he's got me defending Jeff Sessions, but in this contest of two loathsome people, Trump is not only worse, but Sessions is right on the law. If you think there's an abuse, you ask the Inspector General. You don't do a political hatchet job because your boss asks you to. Okay, now, Washington Post with a news story out today. Trump has apparently told associates that he has hired the best lawyers for his entire life, but is stuck with Sessions, who is not defending him and is not sufficiently loyal. For the 18th time, can someone educate the president? The Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer in the country. He is not your lawyer. He's not the president's personal lawyer. He's the chief law enforcement officer in the country. So if you have broken the law, Donald Trump, he is supposed to investigate you. In this case, he didn't. He recused himself and he let the deputy attorney general make the case, or not make the case, do the investigation or not do the investigation. He recused himself. So he's not part of this, right? But he's like, "Why did you recuse yourself? You're supposed to defend me if somebody's doing a valid investigation of me." No, he's not. He's not supposed to do that. By the way, even if you thought that, Donald Trump, you're not supposed to be so stupid as to say it publicly, because then you're admitting in front of the whole country that you are trying to obstruct justice. But it gets, both worse and funnier, I guess, in a sense. The Post continues, behind the scenes, Trump has derisively referred to Sessions as Mr. Magoo, a cartoon character who is elderly, myopic, and bumbling, according to people with whom he has spoken. He's calling his own attorney general Mr. Magoo. I imagine if Obama was making fun of Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State behind the scenes and giving her stupid nicknames. Hey, look at Daffy Duck over there. We'd be like, why, is he mentally stable? And of course, that's the point here. The president is not anywhere near mentally stable. And he is in a panic to cover up whatever he did with the Russians, because he has got to end that investigation. In fact, now the investigation, of course, is looking at why he's in a panic, why he's obstructing justice in plain view in front of all of us. So in recent months, Mueller's team has questioned witnesses in detail about Trump's private comments and state of mind in late July and early August of last year, around the time he issued a series of tweets belittling his beleaguered attorney general. These people said the thrust of the questions was to determine whether the president's goal was to oust Sessions in order to pick a replacement who would exercise control over the investigation into possible coordination between Russia and Trump associates during the 2016 election, these people said. Now, there's your obstruction of justice. Now, look, it's not easy to prove. If Mueller wants to prove that, he's gonna have to show two things. One, Trump wanted Sessions to leave so he can get someone to do his political dirty work and kill the investigation. One is he wants Sessions to leave for that reason. Well, Trump has basically admitted that in public and apparently in private. So that part's easy. That part's already done. And Trump did it for Mueller. The second part is still really hard. You'd have to show specifically with intent that Trump wanted to remove Sessions so that he could end the investigation because he thinks the investigation is going to uncover something about him. Look, I don't know that Mueller can prove that, but it would have been much harder to prove if he had to prove both parts. But Trump proved the first part for him. Yeah, I definitely want to get rid of Sessions, and it's definitely about this investigation. Okay, one last thing there. At the time, the White House advisor told the Washington Post reported that Trump was stunned that Sessions had not yet quit when he was calling him weak and beleaguered. The president said that the advisor added, had been hoping the attorney general would be so embarrassed by Trump's scathing comments that he would leave. Trump in this period also ordered his then chief of staff, Reince Priebus, to get a resignation letter from Sessions. Again, if they have all of that on the record in the investigation, now they're 2/3 of the way through proving that he was trying to obstruct justice. I want Sessions to leave. I want him to leave because of the investigation. Make him resign. I don't know that there's much left there in order to prove that he's trying to get him to get out of there because he wants to end the investigation of himself, which is obviously illegal. Obviously, it's obvious to everyone except the president and, of course, ironically, his myopic followers. So, speaking of which, let's go to irony. Now let's have a little bit of fun. That's the serious part. If you didn't grow up watching Mr. Magoo, you might want some background on him. And this is good. The original Magoo, Washington Post reports in a different article, was rich, resentful of the youth, pro-business, and functionally blind. And there was a riff, on the myopic conservatism of 1950s America. That kind of sounds like the conservatism of today. So Mr. Magoo was actually a character making fun of conservatives back then. And I get that Trump's attacks against Sessions are not that complicated and they're not too cerebral and not based on necessarily the history of the actual cartoon of Mr. Magoo. It's probably more because of looks. So let's take a look here. So that's Jeff Sessions. This is Mr. Magoo. This is Jeff Sessions and Mr. Magoo. That is a rare point I will concede to Donald Trump. Okay, now, but back to the original Mr. Magoo. Here's some descriptions of him in a book about him. He was an irascible millionaire. Who does that sound like? Not Jeff Sessions, but perhaps a certain president that we know. Hold on. He had, quote, absolute self-confidence. And he wreaked havoc upon others. I'm pretty sure I know who that is. That's that guy. That also kind of fits. And finally, just a fun little fact for you guys to end the segment, having nothing to do with politics. The original voice of Mr. Magoo was Jim Backus, Thurston Howell from Gilligan's Island. Apparently he had a little niche in doing rich people's voices. So God bless Jim Backus. That was a fun part of my youth. Okay. And what's gonna be really fun is seeing Donald Trump in handcuffs. Okay, we're moving forward. Now, we're gonna take a little bit of a break here. When we come back, Bernie Sanders attacked by Howard Dean and the establishment. I will attack back, and that'll be fun.
I mean, they have so many checks and balances that you can be mentally ill and it takes you 6 months before you can prohibit it. I mean, they have so many checks and balances that you can be mentally ill and it takes you 6 months before you can prohibit it. So we have to do something very decisive. Number one, you can take the guns away immediately from people that you can adjudge easily are mentally ill. The problem, they didn't take any guns away. Now, that could have been policing. I think they should have taken them away anyway, whether they had the right or not.
To court obtain an order, and then collect not only the firearms, but any weapons in the possession
or
of that
might
individual.
take the firearms first and then go to court, because that's another system. Because a lot of times, by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. He had a lot of firearms. They saw everything. To go to court would have taken a long time. So you could do exactly what you're saying, but take the guns first, go through due process second.
I was on air when it happened, and so I had it in my ear, was watching every second of it, and I just, it's great to watch when you're watching it on TV, and I love the fascinating discussions, but at the same time, it doesn't make for great policy for keeping our kids safe.
Back on the Young Turks, I'll read some tweets for you guys. Emily Vandermeulen says, oh my God, Alex Jones sounds like a pig hybrid. Okay. Eric Gwynn says maybe Alex Jones is getting Soros confused with Gorka. Art Murray says, nope, I can't read that one, sorry. And I'll go to YouTube Super Chat. Jerkimer James says, great show, keep it up. Thank you, appreciate it. Gotta go, I got a lot of stories for you. Let's go over to Trump and the NRA. Okay, Donald Trump the other day had a bipartisan get-together at the White House and said some really interesting things that were not expected. Now, I had some predictions about that, which we will, of course, get to in a second. But since it was bipartisan, a couple of Democratic senators were there, like Amy Klobuchar, and she proposed expanded background checks. Now, the NRA is against that. And then Feinstein has been proposing the assault weapons ban. Now, the NRA is very much against that, and Trump has never said that he was in favor of that until now. Now, watch this interaction.
The states that have these background checks, they have a 38% lower domestic homicide rate. This is domestic violence. Right. And for those cases especially, it makes a major difference. And this number, just for you to keep with you, 6,000 women in 10 years were killed by a partner, whether it was a spouse or boyfriend. 6,000, I think, would make a major difference.
So if you could add that to this bill, that would be great, Diane. If you could add what you have also, and I think you can, into the bill.
Joe, are you ready?
Can you do that? Joe, can you do that? Pat, can you add some of the things you're not going to agree with.
Yeah, if you help.
Well, no, I'll help, but can you add what Amy and what Diane have? Can we add them in? I would
Enacted
say
it with
this.
Republican
We're going to get
support.
it passed.
Yeah.
We're going to get it passed. If you can add domestic violence paragraphs, pages into this bill, I'm all for it. I think it's terrific if you can do it. It can be done. That can be done too.
Expanding background checks, adding people who have been convicted of domestic abuse to people who can't get guns, banning assault weapons. You see the Democrats got excited there, and the Republicans are like, no, somebody stop him, somebody tackle him, because he doesn't know any policy. Don't get him in front, look, don't put him in front of cameras if you're a Republican. He's just gonna embarrass you. Look, if you ask me, is that a deal? I'll take every one of those. Great deal, wonderful, let's do it. But as I told you yesterday, he ain't gonna do it. We'll get to that in a second. I'm gonna show you a couple of fun videos here. Look at the Democrats get excited when he says yes. Here's Klobuchar first.
I'm all for it. I think it's terrific if you can do it. It can be done. That can be done too.
Yeah, you wanna do it? Hey, great, man, keep going. Here's Feinstein getting excited about her part.
So if you
Not
could
just-
add that to this bill, that would be great, Diane. If you could add what you have also, and I think you can, into the bill. So
Joe, are you ready?
Can you do that? Joe, can you do that? Pat, can you add?
Don't get too excited. But look, I like those provisions. I'm glad that they are there fighting for those provisions, but it ain't gonna happen because Trump doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But here's more from Trump.
Now, this is not a popular thing to say in terms of the NRA, but I'm saying it anyway. I'm going to just have to say it. But you can't buy, I mean, think of it. You can buy a handgun. You can't buy one. You have to wait till you're 21. But you can buy the kind of weapon used in the school shooting at 18. I think it's something you have to think about.
We just signed that.
So I'll tell you what, I'm going to give it a lot of consideration, and I'm the one bringing it up, and a lot of people don't even want to bring it up because they're afraid to bring it up. I can say that the NRA is opposed to it, and I'm a fan of the NRA. I mean, there's no bigger fan. I'm a big fan of the NRA. They want to do it. These are great people. These are great patriots. They love our country. But that doesn't mean we have to agree on everything.
I'm a big fan. I'm the biggest fan, but I don't agree with that. The tough guy continues. I can't wait for the backpedal. But okay, here, let's watch.
Chris, did you have something?
No. I think you underestimate the power of the gun lobby. So.
No, I'll tell you what. The reason I had lunch with the NRA on Sunday, I called them. I said, you got to come over. I said, fellas, we got to do something. And they do have great power. I agree with it. They have great power over you people. They have less power over me. I don't need it. What do I need? Some of you people are petrified of the NRA. You can't be petrified.
They have less power over you. You can't be petrified. Wait till you see the conclusion. Okay, I told you. But hold for that, hold. In that clip though, I loved Chris Murphy, who is a Democrat who's fought really hard for gun control from Connecticut, going like, yeah, really? You're gonna pass all those laws you just said? Yeah, you don't even know how much the NRA has power over you, you schmuck. And he's just like, look, Chris Murphy would love to pass those bills. He's like, yeah, go keep on blabbing. And then meanwhile, Cornyn, who's a deeply right-wing Republican, totally bought by the NRA, sitting in the middle like, like mortified, like, oh, Jesus Christ, what is going on? All right, but we haven't gotten anywhere near the worst part yet. Now listen to what Trump's gonna say. He's gonna say, let's take people's guns away, and I don't care what the law is. What? Imagine if Obama had said this. Watch.
I mean, they have so many checks and balances that you can be mentally ill and it takes you 6 months before you can prohibit it. So we have to do something very decisive. Number one, you can take the guns away immediately from people that you can adjudge easily are mentally ill. The problem, they didn't take any guns away. Now, that could have been policing. I think they should have taken them away anyway, whether they had the right or not.
Go to court, obtain an order, and then collect not only the firearms, but any weapons in the possession
Or
of that
might
individual.
take the firearms first and then go to court, because that's another system. Because a lot of times, by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. He had a lot of firearms. They saw everything. To go to court would have taken a long time. So you could do exactly what you're saying, but take the guns first, go through due process second.
Really? Deal. The senators are looking around stunned. What is he saying? So he says in the beginning, let's just take the guns away first. And then Pence jumps in. It's like, no. What he meant is, of course, you get a court order, and then you could have the legal right to take the gun away under very limited circumstances. Trump comes in, no, Mike, you misheard me. I just say take the guns. We take the guns first, due process second. If Obama had said that, every right winger would be like, we know it, he's coming for our guns. Well, your daddy just said it. Donald Trump said it. What are you going to do about it? Well, don't worry. You don't have to do anything because the NRA is going to yell at him, and all their fanboys are going to yell at him until Trump buckles, because of course he's a coward and he never meant any of it. But let's show you some of the yelling. Dana Loesch went on and said, oh, this is wrong, NRA spokesperson. Then Maria Bartiromo, super right-winger on television, she's yelling at Kellyanne Conway. Let's watch.
Kellyanne, obviously this is a very troubling comment. What did the president mean exactly by that? Is he ignoring the Constitution and taking someone's property before due process? But is the president going to clarify that he, in fact, is not going to ignore the Constitution and take somebody's property before due process? But I almost feel like yesterday he was trying so hard to appear that he is willing. He's going to be in the middle of the road. He's willing to make changes to answer the upset over these school shootings. But doesn't he have to be careful not to step on due process? This is America, the Constitution. And what he said, I almost feel like maybe it was for the cameras. And I mean, you're saying he didn't mean that.
No, I didn't say he didn't mean that. No, Maria. What I've said, this is the third time I'm going to say it.
About due process, blowing off due process.
So, like, really? Okay, of course not really. So yesterday we had the quotes, but we didn't have the video. Based on the quotes, here was my prediction on yesterday's show. Even Republicans know Trump's an idiot and he doesn't really know what he's saying. He's incredibly unstable. You know it. If you're a Republican or a right winger, you know he's not a very stable genius. You know he's a moron. You know he blurted that out and he's going to walk it back tomorrow or later today. So he'll walk this back and go, oh, sorry. But he won't do it. He'll have an aide come out and do an official statement. No, we believe in the new process, the American justice system, and the NRA is awesome. And please send the check to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Let's see if that happened.
The president respects the Constitution, including the Second Amendment and the 5 million or so members of the NRA who are law-abiding, peaceful gun owners. The point here, Maria, is school safety. Anybody who came here to the White House yesterday and thinks that the session was about gun grabbing or gun control is mistaken, and they know it. Backpedal, sending an aide out to walk back the comments, go, wait, no, we're not gonna grab your guns. And then that wasn't enough. They're like, wait, we gotta hear from you. So Trump tweets this morning, many ideas, some good and some not so good, emerged from our bipartisan meeting on school safety yesterday at the White House. Background checks a big part of the conversation. Gun-free zones are proven targets of killers. After many years, a bill should emerge. Respect Second Amendment. In other words, I'm so sorry. I respect the Second Amendment. I didn't mean it. What happened, tough guy? I thought you weren't afraid of the NRA. Why don't we pass the ban on assault weapons that you said you were in favor of yesterday? You're not going to, are you? You're going to send an aide to walk it back, just like I said. Coward. Okay. By the way, also idiot. Now, let's go to attacks on Bernie Sanders. So, this morning, a very important story about interfering in our elections by potentially foreign sources. This time about Bernie Sanders. Whoa, this is very interesting. Leveling the charge among many others is Howard Dean, who, believe it or not, at some point was a progressive before he became a lobbyist in Washington. So he tweets out this in regards to the charges against Bernie Sanders. Let's take a look. It says, and all in caps, very Trumpian. Apparently the Russians weren't the only ones screwing around with our elections. And then Sanders fined for accepting foreign donations in 2016 election. Wow, geez, Lord mercy, I didn't know the Australians were trying to buy our elections. And they were going with a curious path of backing Bernie Sanders.
Fascinating. Well, I mean, if Howard Dean was paid to say something, then it must be true. So let's take a look at the article and figure out how devastating this is, okay? Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign will pay $14,500 as part of an agreement with the Federal Election Commission over allegations that the campaign wrongfully accepted in-kind donations from an Australian political party. Now, wow, I wonder what they did. Did they funnel all sorts of money to him and then they bought the Facebook pages and fake news and all that? I guess, I don't know. I mean, it seems really serious. It's $14,500 fine. Whoa. Okay, so let's find out. The complaint centered on a group of 7 Australians who volunteered for the Vermont Independence 2016 presidential bid. Oh, it was a bunch of volunteers. They didn't funnel any money or just volunteers. So why is this even an issue? Well, the Australian Labor Party paid a total of $24,422 for the volunteers' flights and stipends, according to the FEC document provided by the Sanders campaign. So apparently they paid for the flights. And these volunteers show up, they're not donating to Sanders' campaign. So the Sanders campaign thinks, oh, volunteers came in from Australia, lovely, right? And was it so that the Australian Labor Party could interfere in our elections? No, there's 7 Australians who wanted to help Bernie Sanders. And somebody paid for their airline tickets. Okay, but look, if it's a technical violation, God bless. First of all, Sanders cooperated 100% all throughout, of course. And okay, do whatever the process is, and that's fine, and they pay a $14,000 fine. But this is like a big got you? Really? I mean, are you saying it earnestly for the establishment guys? You really think like, Sanders in the bag for the Australians? Everybody knows it. He just sell out the country to the Australians. Come on, you're saying this with a straight face. You're comparing it to the Russian interference, etc. Okay, one more piece of context. The Sanders campaign argued that the campaign did not ask the Australian party to send the volunteers, nor to cover their expenses. They also argued that though some campaign staff members knew that the Australians received stipends, they, quote, mistakenly believed that the services were performed by the ALP delegates constitute exempt volunteer activity, according to the conciliation document. Okay, so there was a slight misunderstanding about a rule. Just to be safe, Sanders settles anyway. According to the FEC document, the volunteers participated in hands-on activity typical of volunteers, including canvassing and planning events. Wow, seems really nefarious, knocking on doors. There's no money being funneled in. Nobody's trying to buy anyone. To make a federal case out of this is unreal. In fact, that goes to the hypocrisy and the corruption of the Federal Election Commission. So if you don't know, the FEC is split into 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. Whenever a Republican is investigated, the 3 Republicans block it. And they go, In fact, there was a recent story we did about how the Chinese are funneling money in through a trade group in America. And the Republicans are like, wait, where's the money being funneled to? Oh, Republican candidates? Yeah, no, I don't see any problem. We're not gonna investigate that. And if it's a Democratic candidate, Democrats go, nope, not gonna investigate it. So the FEC almost does nothing at all. But the one guy they decided to lay the hammer on the most inconsequential issue I have ever seen on this topic, Bernie Sanders. Why? The Republicans are like, oh, we'd love to bury Bernie Sanders. They go to the Democrats. Democrats are like, oh, we'd love to bury Bernie Sanders. You got a deal. For the first time ever, the FEC will do something. By the way, where did all this come from? It was a Republican from New Hampshire named O'Brien. He filed a complaint with the FEC in 2016 after the release of videos filmed by the conservative group Project Veritas, according to WMUR, a local station. Howard Dean and other Hillary Clinton supporters, you're quoting Project Veritas, one of the worst right-wing hatchet job, fake news organizations there is in America. How many progressives have they gone after with lies? These are the guys who smeared Planned Parenthood, and the list goes on. And you're gonna back their claims against Bernie Sanders? How much do you despise progressives? How much do you want to keep that gravy train going? Yes, you're right. Bernie Sanders might get money out of politics. Yes, you're right. He would end the corruption. And for the rest of us, that's great news. But if you're part of the corrupt, you do not like that at all. But to be fair now, you guys all know that perhaps one of the major candidates, Donald Trump, might have gotten interference on a different scale, not a bunch of volunteers who wanted to come help him. But Hillary Clinton is the one that Howard Dean supported. She must have been completely clean of any of this, because I know, because the FEC didn't investigate her. Except for this from WikiLeaks, the CBS quotes. This was from right before the election. Clinton National Finance Director Dennis Chang wrote in April that the campaign needed to make a policy decision on whether to allow those lobbying on behalf of foreign governments to raise money for the Clinton campaign. After some debate, campaign manager Robbie Mook responded that he was okay just taking the money and dealing with any attacks. And Jennifer Palmieri agreed, take the money. Oh, I'm sure the FEC is just working around the clock to make sure that they put those people away. I mean, that's a way worse case. It's not a bunch of volunteers who came in looking to help a fellow progressive. It was foreign money. They knew it was foreign money. Campaign manager and another top staffer says, take the money. I'm okay with taking the money and dealing with any attacks later. Don't worry, Robbie. You're part of the establishment. There aren't gonna be any attacks later. The FEC is gonna protect you no matter what. And then ironically, they're gonna go after the one guy who is not corrupt. This is how dirty establishment politics is played. By the way, what happened to Howard Dean, from a progressive fighter to a supporter of the rich and the powerful, and going on Morning Joe and doing what he's paid to do as a lobbyist, it's just one of the sickest things I've ever seen. It's so sad. It's so sad. And I mean that in all honesty. I defended Howard Dean a billion times on this show when he was the progressive, when he was being attacked by the establishment. For him to turn around and do their dirty work, I'm not sure I've ever seen anything sadder in politics. Okay, one last story. Okay, for me at least. Really interesting story that broke a couple of days ago about Dianne Feinstein. Now, it's old, so I don't want you to get the wrong idea. It's back from 1984 when Feinstein was the mayor of San Francisco. I'm not telling you this because I think Dianne Feinstein, it's not a good story. It's about her defending the Confederate flag. I'm not saying that because I'm telling you that she believes the same things today that she believed in 1984. I'm not telling you that she put up the Confederate flag because she's deeply racist. No. And I'm not saying that like, haha, I'm not saying that, wink. No, I'm really not saying that. But I think it is an important story because it gives you a sense that Dianne Feinstein, her whole career, has done nothing but political calculation. Everything is political calculation. So that was also in play in this case. So let me quote Law and Crime, Colin Kalmbacher writing here, and then I'll explain the context. They explain that California senior Senator Dianne Feinstein once fought and pushed for the prosecution of black activists who opposed her repeated efforts to fly the Confederate flag at San Francisco City Hall. Now that is bizarre. Why in the world would you want to fly the Confederate flag on City Hall in San Francisco? I mean, you got no excuse about history and heritage and culture and all that stuff. So, and they explained back then in '84, early in the year, Feinstein okayed the flying of the stained banner, also known as the Confederate battle flag, at City Hall as part of a, quote, historic display. Again, absolutely bizarre. It's not Tennessee, it's not Mississippi. I don't know why San Francisco would want to honor this, the Confederate flag with a historic display. Okay, on April 15, 1984, a communist organizer, Richard Bradley, outfitted in a Union Army uniform, scaled a 50-foot flagpole at the Civic Center in San Francisco and removed the Confederate battle flag. The remnants of that flag were then burned by a Union member. Go get them. As a small fire raged, a crowd of black activists, socialists, and unionists broke into a chorus of the anti-slavery anthem, John Brown's Body. Okay, look, things like that just happened recently with the covering of the Confederate monuments, some of the Confederate monuments being taken down, etc. But look, you got to be careful and you shouldn't break the law. And if you're the mayor, you got to enforce law. I understand that, but it's not the hill I would have fought on. But she was apparently very mad about that. So at the time, Feinstein, who was in the running for the Democratic vice presidential nomination, was seeking to curry favor with the Dixiecrats, who would be arriving in town 3 months later for the Democratic National Convention. She had the flag put back up. Look, I'd be really surprised if Dianne Feinstein is racist and loves the Confederacy. That would be bizarre. I don't think that's the issue here. She wanted the vice presidency in 1984, and they were saying that it was going to be a woman, and they were right. It was a woman. It just happened to be Geraldine Ferraro. So she's angling for it, and she's like, how can I convince the Southern Democrats? Because why? Why in San Francisco? How can I convince the Southern Democrats that I'm with them? Oh, I got it. I'll fly a Confederate flag in San Francisco. Elect a real progressive. Okay, so the activists are like, no, we're not gonna let a Confederate flag fly over San Francisco. Not gonna happen. So they take it down again. And of course, again, Feinstein is enraged. This time, however, Bradley was arrested on charges of vandalism, the second time he took it down. According to a contemporary account of the pretrial maneuvering by the Spartacist League's in-house publication, Workers' Vanguard, which features a roundup of black press coverage on the issue, Feinstein's office worked with San Francisco's then District Attorney Arlo Smith on the prosecution. Of particular concern to Feinstein was that Bradley make restitution to the city of San Francisco for the destroyed flag. So she wanted a black activist to pay for the Confederate flag. Let it go, man. You made your point. Hey, Dixiecrats, I'll do whatever you want. I'm your girl, whatever, okay? You made your point. You're gonna go and insist on his prosecution and insist that he pay it back. All right. As news of Bradley's prosecution spread, phone calls and telegrams swamped Feinstein's office, and finally, Feinstein relented. The exhausted mayor promised not to fly the Confederate battle flag again. Only after she had to be convinced, and there was a world of pressure. Aren't you exhausted trying to get so-called Democratic politicians to be progressive? But wait, the story isn't over. Feinstein apparently wasn't quite content with this turn of events and still had time to make her case to the Democratic Party power brokers. So after Bradley's trial faded from the headlines near the end of June, Feinstein raised the stars and bars, the first flag of the Confederacy. Yeah, no, that's not a progressive. And it's certainly not someone who's gonna fight for you. And look, and if you don't know the context, one last thing that's important. Again, it isn't to go back in time and say she can't change. If you asked her about the Confederate flag now and she still wants to fly it, Mike, you never know with Dianne, but I'd be really, really surprised. I'm trying to be fair to her, okay? But every time that she's had an opportunity to make a political point like this, she has attacked the left, not supported it. It's not the only time. So one time, Kamala Harris of all people was doing a prosecution and it was a really high profile case of a murder, but she didn't want to pursue the death penalty. Feinstein called a press conference and attacked Kamala Harris back then and said, no, we need a death penalty. Why? She wanted to appeal to in the general election to the right wing and say, don't worry, if you need someone to punch the left wing in the face, Dianne Feinstein is your person. Over and over and over again. She says on Medicare for All, she's not gonna do it now. She's been in office for 50 years. That she might do it at a later time. She says, no, it's not the time. It's not the time to help progressives. For Dianne Feinstein, it is never the time to help progressives. It's always the time to help herself. Elect a real progressive in California. You know who I think it should be, Allison Hartson. AllisonHartson.com. We'll have the links below. But if you think it's someone else, do what you got to do. But make sure that California gets the senator it deserves, a progressive one. Young Turks. Stream on the planet.
I ask leave of the Senate to continue my remarks.
Too strong! You're not answering the question. Answer the question. No one is above the law, and that includes the President of the United States of America.
Go, engage, fire.
Congrats to the Young Turks. They actually won a Stream the Award tonight.
We'd like to thank Donald Trump, obviously.
We just crossed 7.6 billion views.
Revolution won't be televised.
Hello, Internet.
I am the least anti-Semitic person that you've ever seen. I think there's blame on both sides.
Oh, these politicians, they're the worst.
They had these beautiful soft towels.
It's just so wrong.
They took your wealth and redistributed to them.
The government's robbing you, and they're distracting you with fucking nonsense.
Fake news, the enemy of the people. Nobody knew that healthcare could be so complicated.
I can't speak as dumb as he understands.
The market will be destroyed by this plan, and 45 million people will be left without insurance.
They will be met with fire and fury. We've just launched 59 missiles.
MSNBC shows the bombs taking off, and Al Jazeera shows you when they land.
The profiling and the Muslim bans have begun.
Today, my father and brother await deportation.
Horrific act of violence in Charlottesville. I want you to see what hate looks like in America.
What a sick country we live in.
It's time to get up and fight back.
Giant protests against Donald Trump.
Women's marches take over more than 500 cities across the United States.
Immigrants throughout the United States who protest. I don't think they're peasants. I actually think that they enrich this country with their culture.
I don't want a resistance. I want a revolution.
History is not on your side.
Your fundamental principle is flawed.
This is outrageous. It's unethical. It's bad government. And frankly, it's fucking, corruption.
We work together as a community and we stand up for each other.
A total solar eclipse. Oh my God.
Climate change is my #1 issue, and to be able to help amplify the message and research of these workers is like a dream come true.
Colin Kaepernick chose to sit during the national anthem to protest police violence against African Americans.
This has sparked a new movement.
More and more women are sharing their stories of sexual assault.
It's happening right in front of our eyes as the culture is shifting.
We have to speak up ourselves, and we have to create movements ourselves.
To see it unfolding in real time as women stand up together collectively and go no more.
So many women came out of that women's march and said, I'm running for office.
You want to talk about the revolution? Here it is. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
TYT.
Young Turks.
You do have the power to change people. You do. I hope one day we can all learn to live together in a decent way and not let oftentimes the media and the corrupt established system tear us apart.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Cenk and Anna with you guys. I'm just going to read a couple tweets real quick. Carrie G says Feinstein isn't racist. She doesn't see color unless it's green. And then I will read a couple of YouTube super chats. Thank you for helping the show by doing that. TYT Army too strong in Vermont. Thank you for defending Bernie, Cenk. Yeah, no problem because that's the reality. And we got to go, so I'm just going to leave it at that. By the way, these revolution hats are flying out of control. That's not a thing to say.
Flying out of control.
Yeah, that's not a word. There's insanity in the control room tonight. There's insanity at shoptyt.com tonight. So
I like that pink one.
I know, right? Can I get a one shot here, guys? ShopTYT.com. Check these out, okay?
Can I have the pink one? I asked Jen. She's like, I don't think you can.
Of course you can have the pink one.
All right.
Okay, I got to be honest with you. We sent one to Nina Turner from Our Revolution, and she sent me a really nice note about it. So you might run into Nina Turner wearing the same hat as you. Okay, that's fun.
It's so cute.
It is. It really is actually. It's
I like
wonderful.
pink.
Anyway, ShopTYT.com helps the show too. What's next?
All right. Earlier this week, lawmakers, specifically Republican lawmakers in this great state of Georgia, threatened Delta over its decision to sever certain ties with the NRA. Now, Delta wanted to take a stand against the NRA and stop offering discount prices for NRA members who wish to fly with that airline. Now, as a direct response to that, Republican lawmakers threatened to take certain tax benefits away from Delta if they pursue this severing of ties with the NRA. Now, Delta remained undeterred and they decided to go ahead with their original plan, and the retaliation has already begun. So here is the update to what lawmakers in Georgia have done. By the way, Delta is one of the largest employers in the state of Georgia. Now, the state House and Senate, within hours of each other, passed a sweeping tax bill that Republicans had amended. They amended it to strip out a sales tax exemption on jet fuel. Atlanta-based Delta would have been the prime beneficiary of this tax break, which would have been worth an estimated $38 million. Now, before we jump in with commentary, look, you know how I feel about, these sweet little perks for corporations to begin with. However, in the context of this story, lawmakers retaliating against anyone, including a corporation, which is not a person, but still a corporation, for its political stance or political speech, I would argue might have some constitutional issues. I don't know, you jump in, Cenk, tell me what you think.
Yeah, look, if Democrats in a blue state attacked a corporation for being too conservative, I mean, you know what Republicans, they hate the free market, they're socialists, they're communists, they're Marxists, they're the worst, and I can't believe they're using taxpayer money, whether it's subsidies or taking away subsidies, to threaten people for their political position, etc. They do it, no concern at all. I mean, so
this is insane.
In the House, on the House side in Georgia, the vote was 135 to 24. So not close, not remotely close. Every Republican voted for it. In the Senate side, 34 to 15, not remotely close. So they're like, oh yeah, punish corporations for not having the politically correct principles and ideas and positions. Great, let's do it. That is literal political correctness.
It's political correctness, you're right. This is, it goes against what they preach about the free market. I mean, you're going after a corporation and picking winners and losers based on your own political beliefs. And look, let's put it in the context of a more liberal state, right? So let's do a little throwback. Back in, I believe it was 2012, Chick-fil-A was in the middle of controversy because the head of Chick-fil-A during an interview talked about how he was against same-sex marriage.
Yep.
And can you imagine if the state of California decided, we don't like that, so we're gonna increase sales taxes specifically for Chick-fil-A. Or we're going to get rid of a specific tax break that we gave the fast food industry, but it'll only apply to Chick-fil-A because we don't like what they had to say about gay marriage. First of all, I would be 100% against that, even though I was not in favor of what the head of Chick-fil-A said. Elected officials cannot go after people or companies because they disagree with their political views. That's insane.
So guys, if you're a Republican and you believe in money and politics, and you're like Ben Shapiro and you think that corruption's awesome, let's just, more money by billionaires and corporations are terrific because corporations are people, my friend, okay? All right, wait, are they people or are they not people? Because if you discriminate against an actual person because of their political opinion and the government punishes them, that is clearly 100% unconstitutional.
You can't make the argument that it's not unconstitutional. That's plain as day, okay? So if the companies are people as you claim, then you should be outraged. Oh my God, they did something unconstitutional to the person called Delta, right? So you don't believe they're people. The only reason you say that is because you'd like to take their money and give it to corrupt politicians.
That's right. So that is the update to the story. We'll see if anyone holds these lawmakers accountable for what they're doing. But I want to be clear about the fact that the current governor, Governor Nathan Deal, did not like this plan, but he did agree to sign the tax proposal that the lawmakers agreed to. The real catalyst for this is the lieutenant governor, Casey Cagle, and he's been on cable news talking about how Delta needs to be punished. He's going after them very aggressively, and we'll see how this all plays out. But again, keep in mind that Delta is one of the largest employers in the state of Georgia, and in response to this action, other states have essentially made proposals to bring Delta to their state. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't like the subsidy anyway, so I don't mind the results.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's the context in which they decided to take that
but you can't do it
away.
this way. That's right. And Nathan Deal, he's like, look, I was just trying to give every corporation a tax cut. So why are you doing that? And he knows why, because the lieutenant governor is running for office, so he's got to be as barbaric as possible.
I mean, look at what they're willing to punish a corporation for. They're willing to punish a corporation for going against one of their biggest donors, but they will never go after a corporation for screwing over its employees or exploiting its employees. They do not represent you. They don't care about you as a constituent. All they care about is their bottom line and who's padding their pockets. We got to take a break.
All right, when we come back, we got a lot for you guys, including corruption from Kushner, and I would like to deport Melania Trump. I think I have an excellent case for that. I'm not kidding. Okay. We'll talk about that when we come back. Welcome to the Young Turks on a momentous day. What now? What now? We get animated about the news. Yes, we're not the robots on TV. I actually care about the news. Guilty. Guilty, I care.
Senator Sanders, I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to ask you a policy question.
Hey, how dare you? That's the problem. You're the problem. Don't ever attack the Republicans. Where the fuck is the liberal media? Where is it? I don't see it. No. These are all establishment guys. They love the system as it is. They're all enormously rich off the system that exists.
For us, this system isn't working.
So what this campaign is about is trying to create an economy that works not only for the people on top, but works for all Americans.
So what's happening in the Democratic Party is what used to happen in the general election. We would have a person who represented workers and the people and the voters, and then the Republicans would represent business and corporations and Wall Street, and we'd have a frickin' election. That's happening all inside the Democratic Party this time.
And instead of focusing on issues that actually matter to millennial voters, for instance, we're focusing on non-issues in the country. The fear-mongering about Muslims and terrorism.
Here comes Bernie in Illinois. Tell your friends, tell your family, this thing's not over. That voice in the wilderness, it created a ripple effect, which then now is a tidal wave as we stand right now. I love this show. We're gonna rock the boat. We're gonna be counter-establishment. We're gonna tell people the truth to the best of our abilities, and we're gonna keep it real with them.
Membership gives us so much journalistic freedom. It's incredible. So, tytnetwork.com/join.
back on the Young Turks on a busy day. So just member shout outs here. Brendan Harris and Sandra Oberbrockling. That's a fun name, Sandra.
Awesome name.
Yeah. So tonight we'll have a post game for you guys as usual.
Oh, I have a topic.
Yes.
Okay, so I saw the play yesterday, last night, and no, but it made
Was it better
me,
than a ballet?
It was actually insanely good, and so I want to talk about that. But more importantly, it made me really rethink my stance on sex work.
Huh.
It was very interesting. So we'll talk about that.
Is that the same one my wife went to?
Yes, yeah.
You guys went together, right?
Yeah. It was
that's
so much
cute.
fun, yeah.
Okay, well, I was working. Okay, nice of you guys to have fun. Anyway, what I was doing last night was doing old school with Ben, where we invented not one, not two, not three, but 4 new words.
Yeah, one of them is my favorite.
Oh, really?
Ben and I already talked about it, yes.
No, but by the way, they're really good words. I'm not kidding. Like, there's some chance they're gonna stick. We'll talk about it a little bit more in the post game. I'm curious what your favorite is. tytnetwork.com/join to become a member and get all the post games and old school and all the shows. I'm gonna give you one more URL here. Oh, and I'd love to check it on Kansas, but we'll do that later in the show. Apparently, I was supposed to say about the members only hats, and those are apparently members only hats. tytnetwork.com/communications to do something. Okay, good luck. All right, what's next?
Great. All right. Jared Kushner this week lost his top-level security clearance. And so since Mueller does not really speak about his investigation much, and we don't know the details of that investigation, there has been an investigation by reporters into some of the business dealings that Kushner has had that could have potentially compromised him when it comes to his job as a member of Trump's administration. Now, this has nothing to do with Russia, so everybody calm down. It has more to do with banks in the United States, meetings that he had with these banks while he was in the White House, and the gigantic loans that his family's business, real estate business, got immediately after those meetings. So let me give you the details on that. So there's Apollo, which is a private equity firm. In November, Apollo lent $184 million to Mr. Kushner's family real estate firm, Kushner Companies. The loan was to refinance the mortgage on a Chicago skyscraper. Keep in mind that that amount was a little unusual from Apollo. It was triple the size of the average property loan made by Apollo's real estate lending arm, Securities Filing Show. Okay, so there's Apollo. That's a pretty large amount of money. But then you move on to Citigroup. An even larger loan came from Citigroup, which lent the firm and one of its partners $325 million to help finance a group of office buildings in Brooklyn. Okay, again, when we reference firm here, it's Jared Kushner's family's real estate company. The loan was made in the spring of 2017, shortly after Mr. Kushner met with the White House met in the White House with Citigroup's chief executive, Michael Corbat. The two men talked about financial and trade policy and did not discuss Mr. Kushner's family business, one person said. So there are multiple sources that are speaking to the New York Times about these meetings, and that is what they claimed. But some of you might wonder, okay, well, what would a private equity firm like Apollo possibly want? What would Citibank or Citigroup possibly want? Well, Apollo has sought ways to benefit from the White House's possible infrastructure plan, and its executives had tens of millions of dollars personally at stake in the tax overhaul that was making its way through Washington last year. When it comes to Citigroup, one of the country's largest banks, it's right now heavily regulated by federal agencies, and like other financial companies, it's trying to get the government to relax its oversight of the industry.
All right, so 3 points here. Number one, this is why you avoid conflict of interest, because now we'll never know. Do we know for sure that Citigroup met with Kushner and they gave him the giant loan to his family because they wanted tax breaks or other regulatory issues, like, by the way, destroying Dodd-Frank, which the Trump administration is in the middle of doing? Well, a lot of people would rightfully say, of course, yeah, that they want those things, and then the people in power, they grease by giving them this giant loan. But even if that's not the case, you've obviously created an appearance of a conflict of interest and an appearance of corruption. Well, the conflict of interest is definite, but it is an appearance of corruption. So that's why we don't want conflict of interest issues. That's why you shouldn't meet with people who you're gonna pass laws about while they're giving your family hundreds of millions of dollars. So now that's point one. Point two is Apollo, now they got something really important in return, which I'll get to as point three. But I didn't know this, they gave the money through their real estate fund, okay? And their real estate fund apparently is, their largest investor is the government of Qatar. That's interesting. That's interesting on a couple of fronts. First of all, as a foreign government, I hear that foreign governments getting involved in our politics is really, really bad, okay? But somehow it's Qatar and whatever, okay? All right, so, but then the second point is, one that this article from the New York Times did not connect, and I don't know if they're connected, but let me just note that Kushner was looking for $500 million for one of his properties in New York, the biggest one, 666 Fifth Avenue. He first tried to sell it to the Chinese, a company called Anbang, which is owned by the Chinese government. While he was in the transition period, he's gonna go and serve the president soon, dealing with the Chinese government, and they were gonna way overpay. And it was so controversial that the Chinese government was like, okay, forget it, and they backed out, right? This is just too ugly.
That's pretty brazen, by the way, in the process of the transition.
That was unreal, that was record-breaking corruption. And Kushner's not the one who backed out, the Chinese backed out. They're like, look, this looks bad even for us, okay? Then Kushner then went to the government of Qatar and asked for $500 million. And again, Qatar backed out because they're like, no, everybody's paying attention, this doesn't look good, okay? Then, look at this, through two different properties, Kushner Companies gets $500 million. Part of it is from Citibank, the other part is from, in a roundabout way, the government of Qatar. Now, it really might be for those two different properties and not for Fifth Avenue, which is in a lot of trouble. That's their biggest building and in a world of hurt, right? It might bankrupt the whole company if it goes under, right?
Damn.
So, but it does happen to be $500 million in both cases, and it is funneled, at least part of it, through the government of Qatar, at least, and the conduit is Apollo. And he had many meetings with this guy from Apollo. It wasn't just one meeting. And they say, well, I know he's the founder, but he didn't work on that particular loan. Oh, come on. That's totally ridiculous.
He's still involved in this family's business. And it's the same situation with Trump where he's like, yeah, blind trust. I don't even know if he actually did the blind trust. He claimed he would do it and it doesn't appear that there was any.
No blind trust. Trump handed it off to his kids. That's not a blind trust. Blind trust is you hand it off to a lawyer and you don't know where your money is, and hence there's no conflict of interest. Trump knows exactly where his money is. Mar-a-Lago, all of his properties run by his kids, who he talks to all the time. In the case of Kushner, he says, well, I divested from the company, but actually some of these buildings he still has money in.
Yes.
So the conflict of interest is 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, and the final part of it is back to Apollo. So Apollo could funnel the money to the Kushners and maybe they make a profit. It's possible, we don't know, that part's not clear. So that would give them one incentive. The other incentive is to help the guys in power. And what would Apollo want in return? Well, Trump during the campaign had said that he was going to take away a loophole that allowed private equity companies and their owners to pay half the taxes they normally would. Well, guess what happened? They didn't take away the loophole.
Right.
So private equity guys, like the ones that run Apollo, got to keep their loophole and cut their taxes in half. Well, that gives you a lot of incentive to give a loan, even if you're not gonna get the best rates or the best deal out of it. So mission accomplished.
There's just so many shady things that are incredibly apparent, and it's not even, it's out in the open, it's rather transparent. So for instance, the White House used to make public their scheduled meetings. So who's meeting with whom, what are they, not necessarily what they're talking about, but they were pretty transparent in the beginning about who was coming to the White House for these meetings. And now all of a sudden they're like, no, we're not telling anyone anything. And so organizations that want to hold the administration accountable have to file Freedom of Information requests, and they have to fight pretty aggressively to get information about who's meeting with Trump officials. And so luckily we know this information now. And you're right. I mean, look, there is a conflict of interest, and we already know that these two companies have handsomely benefited from, what the Trump administration has done policy-wise. So yeah, the loopholes are still there. The tax cuts for the corporations, of course, have already been implemented. And look, to be fair, let's hear from Trump's lawyer. Actually, this is a spokesperson for Trump's lawyer, Graphic 39. Mr. Mirijanyan, the spokesman for Mr. Kushner's lawyer, said that Mr. Mueller had not sought from Kushner companies or Mr. Kushner any information or document concerning any business dealing either has had. So that was a direct response to those who were speculating that Kushner lost his top security clearance as a result of these meetings and business dealings. But who knows?
And I want to clarify one last thing. So I said they cut their taxes in half. In essence, because they didn't go back to the regular rates that the rest of America pays. But they'd always had that loophole. And Trump said he was going to take it away and didn't. So they continue to pay half of what they would have to pay otherwise. All right, what's next?
All right. Give me 1 second. All right, so H.R. McMaster is likely to be ousted from the White House, and he could be gone as soon as next month. He is the national security advisor for Donald Trump, and they have had a tiff or two over the Russia investigation. And so as a result, you know how Trump is. If he doesn't feel like someone is being loyal to him, that person's job is on the line. According to reporting, as early as next month, in a move orchestrated by Chief of Staff John Kelly and Defense Secretary James Mattis, H.R. McMaster could be gone. Most recently, McMaster told a forum in Germany that Russian meddling in the election was incontrovertible, and Trump did not like that. In fact, immediately after, he tweeted the following: General McMaster forgot to say that the results of the 2016 election were not impacted by or changed by the Russians, and that the only collusion was between Russia and Crooked H, the DNC, and the Dems. Remember the dirty dossier, uranium speeches, emails, and the Podesta company. Okay, so
by the way, of course, most of that tweet is not true. Okay, Mueller did not conclude that there was that the election was not impacted. He never said
no one's concluded that, and it's also, in my opinion, impossible to conclude that. So
one way or another.
Yeah.
When I saw this news story, I was a little surprised because I didn't realize McMaster was in this kind of trouble. So I even, when I first saw the headline, assumed that McMaster was pulling the chute and was like, I gotta get out of here. This place is a mess. Right?
And I wouldn't blame him for that.
By the way, it is not normal for people to leave this quickly from the administration and over and over and over again. Priebus and Spicer and Scaramucci and Bannon and McMaster, et cetera. So in the case of McMaster, he had taken over from Mike Flynn, who of course has now pled guilty to perjury and is cooperating with a special counsel. So just note for the record, any other president, Republican or Democrat, Obama, Bush, Clinton, if their national security advisor had been convicted and pled guilty, it would be the biggest scandal of their administration, right?
Yeah.
So, and we just like breeze past it like, oh, the former national security advisor is going to prison. Anyway, so this national security advisor, what did he do? I mean, he's not going to prison or anything like that. It's certainly not anything as bad as Flynn. So it turns out, no, he's not leaving voluntarily. In fact, they were talking, Mattis and John Kelly, about McMaster's a good guy, let's find him a soft landing. So he's being thrown out. And so they're trying to figure out what part of the military can we sneak him back into so he can get 3 stars or maybe even 4 stars and then retire with some degree of grace eventually, et cetera, right? So why is he being kicked out? It turns out just for saying that the collusion was incontrovertible. That's it. That apparently put Trump in a rage. And he's like, that's it, I want him gone, I want him gone. But wait, do you care how he's actually doing his job? Is he a good national security advisor? Has he helped you with foreign policy? No, he once said one sentence in public that, by the way, is true and everyone else in politics agrees to except Trump. And he's like, that's it. Because of
It's his ego. It's his ego. He's obsessed with people feeling as though his election was illegitimate and it was influenced by a foreign government, that he didn't earn it. He's obsessed with that. And so, yeah.
But Anna, it's not just the ego. You're absolutely right. He's so thin-skinned. I've never seen any person like this, let alone a president or any official. But it's also that he's in a panic over this investigation. If you can't see that, you're trying not to see it, right? And so one of his top officials says one sentence he doesn't like about the investigation. It's a third rail. And he's like, yeah, he's gotta go. He's gotta go. By the way, Hope Hicks now gone. And it turns out that Trump was in a rage that she said that every once in a while she had to tell white lies to the president. That's part of the reason she's leaving after the 8 hours of testimony that she gave in the House. And that also touches on the investigation. And they asked her about the investigation for 8 hours.
Right.
She says one little thing that he doesn't like, she's gone. How many people can you bury before you got no allies left?
So, okay, so this is my perspective, this is speculation, whatever. But I always try to, even if it's someone that I really don't like Donald Trump, I try to put myself in their shoes and try to think about how I would react if I were in his position. Now, look, I do think that there was meddling by Russia. We've had this discussion a million times. I'm not going to get into that again. But let's say if we gave him the benefit of the doubt, and that it was a witch hunt, and that people, Democrats primarily, just want to get rid of him, and this is what they're holding on to as a strategy to get rid of him. If you feel like it's a witch hunt, and then you have members of your own administration make comments that could be interpreted in any way as attacking you or agreeing with the critics, like, I would be furious. So if I was under investigation like that, and someone here made a comment like McMaster did, and I'm not really guilty of anything, yeah, I would be insanely angry about it. It's like, come on, I need people on my team. This is a witch hunt, who's on my team? So that's me giving him the benefit of the doubt. But with that said, it's the way he reacts that makes me agree with you that he's afraid, right? Because he always goes to, no, Russia had no impact, Russia had no impact. And then they're not forthcoming. They lie about things and they get caught up in their lies. It's all very strange. If he was forthcoming from the beginning, if members of his administration were forthcoming from the beginning, and he didn't react the way that he does react in those tweets, then I don't know, I would agree.
No, Anna, you're being way overly generous to him. I know you're trying to, but so he's not a normal employer. So first of all, if he was a normal employer, so let's say me, right? So Jimmy doesn't agree with me on Russia. And he said that, right?
Yeah.
If I were like, I'm in a rage, right? I'm firing him,
I know.
right? Okay, I'd be an ass, right? So, but that again would be whatever. That's, you run a company, that's your choice. You have whatever you want to do, right? But he's the president, and that's the national security advisor. For you to fire a person whose job is to protect the country because you didn't like what he said about you in one particular sentence, that's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
I know, look, I agree with you. Overall, I agree with you. I'm just trying to provide a different perspective. I don't know why, just for the sake of the conversation. But one other thing I want to add, look, maybe Trump just doesn't see the need for a national security advisor. I mean, he doesn't like national security briefings. He doesn't think it's important. He doesn't pay attention. He spends all his time tweeting and watching cable news. I mean, obviously, I think it's important to have these advisers, but he doesn't value these people.
Because it's not about Trump.
Exactly.
So he doesn't care.
Exactly.
He's like, North Korea is doing X, Afghanistan is doing Y. Where's the word Trump in these sentences? He doesn't care about the country. He doesn't care about your security. All he cares about is his own orange ass. And then finally, John Kelly just said right before we came on air, he was running Homeland Security, and when all the shakeup happened at the White House, he went over, became chief of staff, and he's like, "Oh man, that was the dream job. I wanted that job. That was just to keep people safe, and that's what I built my career for." He's like, I wound up as chief of staff because I guess I must have done something wrong, and God wanted to punish me.
He said that?
Yeah. Okay, so now chief of staff is a much higher position. The chief of staff is next to the president is probably as important as it gets because he controls the president's agenda, helps to set policy. Couldn't be more important for him to say, "God punished me by making me Trump's chief of staff." He's like, "Where's the shoot? Where's the shoot? I got to get out of here."
He's gone. He's gone.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
And by the way, that Trump's going to be furious about that.
Oh my God! I can't wait for the tweets.
Okay, so
it's going to be amazing.
Right now, the only reason why he might not immediately fire him is because that wasn't about the Russia investigation specifically.
Right.
So it didn't touch his, third rail. But guys, overall, Hicks, McMaster, Kelly trying to find a way to get out. That's why he criticized Ivanka Trump the other day, saying she was playing government over at the Olympics with the North Koreans. You know what's happening? What I told you was going to happen. It's devolving, and it's devolving way quicker than people anticipated. And it's like falling apart at the seams. We're going on like, oh, it's no big deal. This is one of the stories today. Now McMaster is gone and Hope Hicks is gone. These are giant players in the administration. Any other administration that has a communications director and the national security advisor going back-to-back days, you'd be like, oh my God, what the hell is going on? It's absolutely exploding. I know that we got used to the explosions and the insanity, but this is a quicker pace. It is devolving. Soon Kelly will be gone, and then you'll have complete pandemonium. And soon after that, President Pence.
Okay, you need to relax.
All
I
right.
totally disagree with you.
All right, let's see what happens.
Okay.
Oh wait, you're disagreeing with me? That's it, you're fired.
All right, we got to take a break. Let's do that when we come back. Steve Mnuchin spoke at UCLA. Did not go over well. We have video to show you. You do not want to miss it.
Whoa, Nelly, let me tell you about aspiration.com. You can go to the head of the line by going to aspiration.com/TYT, and you don't have to wait on the wait list. There's free access to ATMs all across the world. There's no monthly service fee. I know, it just gets better. 10% of their revenue goes to charity. I mean, it doesn't get any more lib than this, and no funding of political campaigns or industry lobbying. So if you were looking for a progressive place to put your money, I think we've got your answer for you, aspiration.com. All right, back on the Young Turks. Rommel writes in, the US is in an empire in decline. Its corruption can no longer be hidden from everyday people. Please stop trying to portray the US as something more than what it is.
I don't think we're trying.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're really doing that, okay. And this is gonna be the fun portion of the program. Nick Robles wrote in on YouTube Super Chat, and if you write in there, it does help the show, and we try to read more of those. It's the fun portion of the program because I'm going to now try to read Spanish, which is what he wrote in the beginning of this message. Gracias por la motivación del ejercicio en el postgame de Mr. Yoga.
Why does he sound like a soccer announcer? I understood from your reading. Thank you for the motivation.
Yeah, well, I understood that too, because I get that motivación is motivation. Okay, doesn't make it rocket science.
But there was a word in there that I'm like, can I see it?
Yeah, ejercicio. I don't.
Ejercicio?
Yeah.
Exercise.
Exercise. De ayer?
Okay, we're taking a little too long.
Yeah,
on this.
we are.
It's okay.
Okay,
Everything's gonna be all right. Edwin will translate later. Okay. Anyway, the rest of the messages. The burn is real, and thanks for Rebel headquarters. It's essential to our futures. I love your efforts, even just the added half hour. Thank you, Nick. And so tonight on Rebel headquarters, by the way, I got a great candidate in Texas who used to work with an organization that's a huge friend of the show. So I love these guys who we worked with in the past. They're running for Congress. They got a good shot at winning. I'll tell you about that. By the way, if you're in Texas, tytnetwork.com/register to register right now and go vote, okay? Because you're allowed to vote early in Texas. The primary is March 6th. We're gonna cover the primary next Tuesday, right after the show, 5 o'clock, boom. We're going to the primary. And on the Rebel headquarters tonight, I'm my first guest, trying to outlaw male masturbation. But you're gonna love her, okay? So I will explain, she will explain, and she's running for governor, and you're gonna wanna support her. Okay, and speaking of progressives running, can I check in on Brent Welder? He's running Kansas 3rd District. And 30,216,
nice.
tytkansas.com, everybody, tytkansas.com. We got to get him to $50,000 so he can hire a field team so they can knock on doors and win that race. He's already leading in that race against the incumbent Republican, but let's put him away. We were trying to get to 30,000 by the end of all the shows yesterday. We didn't, but we did get to 30,000 this morning. Can I see 50,000 in the next minute? I'm just kidding. All right, although I'm not going to argue with you.
That would be amazing.
Okay, all right, what's next?
Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin went to UCLA to give a talk about the economy and economics, and some of the students were not in favor of his appearance or the fact that he was giving this talk. In fact, there were protesters outside who were handing out some literature that was against Mnuchin, and then, as you can probably predict, some of the students spoke out as he was trying to speak to the audience. Now, we have 2 videos to give you an example of this, but before we get to those videos, I want to give you another important portion of this story, which is the fact that Mnuchin reached out to UCLA and essentially told the administrators that he is rescinding his agreement to allow the video of the talk to be posted online. So UCLA as an institution will not post it. In fact, UCLA, let's go back to that graphic. UCLA spokeswoman Peggy McInerney wrote in an email that Mnuchin has retracted his permission for the Burkle Center to post its video and podcast of yesterday's event on its website, so we are unable to share either recording with you. Well, the students made recordings of their own, and we are about to show you what those recordings are right now. Take a look. Go.
It wasn't black people and brown people in the inner cities who did this, and yet you are punishing them for being in that position. You are punishing them for the misery that this system, the system that you're enforcing, is committing. And so, okay, don't stand by. Look at what they're doing. But the people of the people of the world, he isn't part of a regime which is hell-bent on consolidating fascism. This tax bill is going after people who are vulnerable. This is politics of cruelty. This is politics of fascism.
So it's kind of hard to pay attention to what they're saying, but they're pretty informed students, and they're arguing about how the tax bill, actually tax law now, negatively impacts the poor, particularly minority communities. And so they have legitimate concerns, but I'm not sure this is the best way to handle it. Because it's easy for people to dismiss you and make it seem as though you have no legitimate points when you go about it this way. And I don't want to be too hard on the students, because I think they're smart and I think they have good points and they want to be heard and they're frustrated and they're angry. But I want to go about it in a strategy that'll be more effective. So.
Yeah, so I have mixed feelings. Look, I love that we hold people in power accountable, and my hybrid approach here is protest in some way that allows them to speak, whether it's you say something in the beginning and then stop, or you turn your back to them, or whatever it might be. So I don't want to not protest them, and they're making perfectly good points, but at some point we have to let them speak. And it does put the cops, and they handled it, I think, okay there, but in a tough position where they've got to physically take you out of the room, otherwise he can't speak, and then we haven't heard him. And look, I think the tax law is horrific. I agree with the students. I think their points are well taken. I think Mnuchin's a clown. He also complained about the host, who's the host of Marketplace radio program, Kai Rizdal, and said that he's biased. So what, unless someone agrees with you and thinks that the tax cuts should go mainly to the rich, that they're biased? No, he's asking you questions.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
so Mnuchin would have complained about everything and did complain about everything.
Right. So I actually was on a panel at UCLA last year, actually about a year ago, and the two professors that I was on that panel with were not progressives at all. And it was great. It was a great conversation. I mean, we disagreed quite a bit, and it was kind of sad to see these educated men make some of the points that they made. But it doesn't matter. We're having a conversation. And even if people disagreed with me or disagreed with those professors, I wouldn't want anyone to disrupt that conversation. There was a Q&A portion of it, which I think is a great opportunity to ask the tough questions and call them out. Call them out. Let them speak, and during the Q&A, say what you need to say, make the comments you need to make, and then ask the tough questions. I think that will allow for a situation where people will take you seriously and you get that message across effectively. And look, I think about it in my own context as well. When I was at Politicon, I was invited on one of the panels, and it was about how conservatives can appeal to millennials. And the audience was full of conservatives. Everyone on that panel, with the exception of maybe one person, were very conservative, and they wouldn't let me talk. They just would not let me talk, and it was incredibly frustrating. So I wouldn't want anyone else with a different political ideology to deal with that either.
I hear the conservatives are for freedom of speech, though. That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Okay. So look, it's important, especially on a college campus, to have an exchange of ideas. Even if you're absolutely convinced that you're right, and I'm convinced that you're right, and I have the facts to back it up. That tax bill, in case you're actually concerned about the substance of it, everybody in the top 1% gets over a $50,000 tax break on average. And after 2027, everyone making less than $75,000 gets their taxes increased. So it is redistribution of wealth to the top. So their points about the bill were fantastic, but then you also partly turn him into a victim, and it doesn't help. It really, really doesn't help. Just let him say the absurd points that he's going to make, counter those points.
Yes.
That's very important, but I keep saying it, we've been consistent on it all along. Let him speak. But if he did want freedom of speech, by the way, it is also slightly ironic that he's now banning the video of his own speech.
I know, it's kind of amazing. I would argue that releasing the full video would actually be better.
Yeah.
Because then at least people can see the full context of what's going on, as opposed to what some of the students are posting. All right, one more break for you guys, and then when we come back, how Trump is destroying the solar industry here in the United States, and people are losing their jobs as a result, and some new tariffs that Trump is proposing that could have negative impacts on how much money you spend on products in the US. We'll come right back.
Hey Dave, as you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was
That's a good point.
1965, and he was in Vietnam.
So this is the time of the day when I talk to you about aspiration.com. Did you look? I talk about their 1% interest rate, all-time 1% annual percentage yield with more than $2,500. Did you know that that's 100 times what normal checking accounts provide at big banks? You know, I triple checked that. I'm like, really, 100 times more than you get at the big banks, and it is. So they don't charge you anything. There's no monthly service fees. You don't have to have a minimum monthly balance or deposit. They put your money in good places that makes you, feel comfortable about where it's going, and you get the best interest rate. And even Money Magazine calls it best checking account in America. I fail to see the downside. So don't have your money in banks that put it into private prisons and guns, etc. Make more money, have less fees, and feel better about yourself. Aspiration.com. All right, back on the Young Turks, Jen Canana with you guys. 2 tweets for you. Chris Allen says, so speakers complain when they don't get free speech, but it's okay to stop free speech of the students. Jeremy Varner says, I was a door-to-door vacuum salesman once. No one I worked with had been paid in months because the contract said you had to hit a quota. By the time I left a month later, there had been a 70% turnover rate. This administration reminds me of those days.
Yeah.
Yep. Sounds about right.
So Hope Hicks was supposed to be the person who reels Trump in.
No.
Which, by the way, like if that's reeling Trump in, I'm very curious to see what he's like when he's not being constrained in it.
You actually have seen in the last 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So Hope Hicks is now in essence gone.
Oh, that's true.
And he calls
Jeff
Sessions despicable, right?
And Mr. Magoo.
Yeah, well, Mr. Magoo was earlier, to be fair. It got reported now, but he said it earlier. He calls Sessions despicable and fires McMaster.
Within 24 hours, already the place is devolving. And it was already not in good shape to begin with. So we'll see. All right, what's next?
All right.
Apparently hope has left the building. Sorry.
Hope and change? Okay. A major US solar company is cutting jobs following Trump's decision to impose large or high tariffs on products necessary to build solar panels here in the United States. So SunPower Corp, which is the company that I'm talking about here, was one of the nation's largest solar panel manufacturers, but now it intends to lay off about 10% of its US workforce. Now, the reason why that they're doing that is because of the fact that it's incredibly expensive to import the necessary materials in order to manufacture and install these solar panels. And keep in mind, before the tariffs were announced, they were planning on expanding their US-based factory. They were going to add jobs, and now they're unfortunately cutting jobs. Now, this attributed to job cuts to the 30%, they attributed the job cuts to the 30% tariffs imposed by the Trump administration on imported solar cells and panels. Chief Executive Tom Werner estimates the new tariffs will cause the company to lose $50 million in 2018 and as much as $100 million in 2019. Now, the industry currently employs more than 260,000 people, primarily in the installation business. By the way, though, those are numbers from the Department of Energy in April of 2017. So the number could have actually increased a little bit since then, but it doesn't matter. They're laying people off as a result of these tariffs.
So, first of all, some context here. They are worried that the industry as a whole is going to lose 23,000 jobs. That's a lot of jobs to lose. Now, Trump was obsessed with coal, and if you watch the Republican convention, as we were forced to do, it wasn't just Trump. One speech after another after another. It was literally, we talked about it during the convention. It was the #1 topic at the convention. It was bizarre. It was coal, coal, coal. We're going to bring coal back. There's only 160,000 jobs in coal nationwide. There's 260,000 jobs in solar nationwide. 100,000 more. The solar industry is way larger than the coal industry. But A, almost no one ever talks about them. And B, now, even if you were to bring coal jobs back, which he hasn't, coal mines are closing all over the country, and I've talked about it, and some Republicans are now disillusioned, and like, oh, we thought he was gonna bring it back. Why are you going out of your way to cost solar jobs? Now, you could say it's bizarre and counterproductive, but it could also be that it's not counterproductive for their interest. The fossil fuel industry supports Donald Trump and the Republican Party with a ton of donations.
Can I give you the number? Because I think it's pretty relevant. Now, this isn't necessarily donations toward Trump, but it's donations toward lawmakers who are likely to support tariffs like the one that Trump imposed. So utilities had spent $50 million between 2011 and 2016 to block clean energy in just 7 states. So that includes Alaska, California, Florida, Michigan, Ohio, Oregon, and Washington. And so luckily California was not persuaded by that money because the solar industry did expand considerably in California. But these tariffs are having an impact. And so it's not looking good for renewable energy in the US.
And this is not a clear-cut liberal versus conservative issue. On trade, the boundaries are blurred. So I know that some folks want more protectionism. What I always say is, well, it depends.
Yeah.
So what's in the, and then a free trade guys are like, oh, if you're for free trade, you're for all these agreements. No, it depends what's in the agreement. So in this case, for the solar panel manufacturers in America, it helps them a little bit to do this tariff. But for the people putting the solar panels in, and which is the heart of the industry, which is much larger, it really hurts them. So you've actually done more damage in this case. Now in the deals like TPP, the problem was that it hands over our sovereignty to companies. It lets them set the rules, not to the advantage of US citizens or even the citizens of the other countries that we're dealing with, but to the advantage of solely the corporations, which makes no sense. But that doesn't mean that every protectionist measure makes sense, because it certainly doesn't, and this one doesn't, and neither does the steel and aluminum tariffs he just announced today, which then immediately tanked the market.
Right, and we're gonna talk about that in more detail in just a minute, but I also wanna draw some attention to a woman named Debbie Dooley. Debbie Dooley is a gun-toting Trump supporter. She is as conservative as can be. However, the one thing she disagrees with Trump and conservatives on is the issue of renewable energy. In fact, she is fighting rather aggressively to support renewable energy in the United States, specifically solar energy, and she even created something known as the Green Tea Coalition. She's part of the Tea Party. Green Tea Coalition to start convincing other conservatives that renewable energy is the way to go. So I want to give her some credit for that, because even though she appears to be an anomaly at the moment, she could have some very positive impact on the conservatives when it comes to these issues.
Doubt it. Okay, I'm going to be humbug about it, but it's going to be a coalition of one. And what happens with conservatives is, it's by the way somewhat true of progressives too, it becomes an identity thing. And I'm a conservative because that's how I grew up and that's how I hate the libs and stuff. And well, do you actually disagree with their policies? Like, for example, no, that creates jobs. I kind of agree with them.
Right.
And if I asked her about Social Security, she'd agree with us. Medicare, she'd agree with us. She'd agree with us on probably 8 out of 10 issues. But I'm a conservative. Unless it affects you. Okay, it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to join our coalition. Unless it's their job on the line.
Okay, let's talk about the other tariffs. Donald Trump just announced additional tariffs that he will use for aluminum and steel. Now, the whole point is to create tariffs that are so expensive that there will be manufacturers who produce aluminum and steel here in the United States as opposed to importing it from other countries. Now, the tariff will basically be 25% for steel, 10% for aluminum. And as soon as he announced that, the stock market did experience a little bit of a downgrade. So for instance, the Dow dropped 500 points. The Dow Industrial Average traded 488 points lower after rising more than 100 points earlier in the day. And also the S&P 500 declined 1.6%, erasing its year-to-date gains. So the stock market immediately responded and reacted to it. Now, for those who might think that China is going to be hit the hardest by these tariffs, that is not the case. When it comes to steel, for instance, we're actually going to probably anger some of our biggest allies: Canada, Brazil, South Korea. Mexico's on that list, although I don't know if Mexico's really our biggest ally at this point.
Through no fault of their own.
Right.
Okay, so this is another complicated issue.
Yes.
So there's different ways to protect our industries, and a lot of the other countries do things that are unfair. And so whether it's China manipulating their currency, other governments propping up their companies in a way that creates so much. It's not that it creates competition that's natural, it creates unnatural competition and drives prices down until it bankrupts our companies, and then they drive the prices up. So you can take, I think, smart action on it, although it is not easy. These are nuanced issues.
Yes.
So what does Trump do instead? No nuance, tariffs, okay? And when you do tariffs, it also drives prices up here in America. So it might have some positive ramifications for people who work in the steel industry, although I'm not positive about that either. Again, there's a lot of nuance here, but it's gonna have some negative ramifications for all the other industries which use steel and aluminum, which now all of their costs have gone up, which they will then pass on to us.
So for instance, the car industry, the automobile industry. So Ford Motor Company noticed that its stock prices dipped considerably after this announcement, and it's because they import steel from other countries. And what do you think they're gonna do? You think they're just gonna absorb those costs? No, they're gonna pass it down to you. So yes, I agree, it's an incredibly nuanced issue. And there is the upside of possibly pushing for the manufacturing of products here in the United States rather than importing it. But there are also people who might lose their jobs because of this, right? If companies need to cut costs in order to absorb some of those tariffs, then They're going to do it. I mean, they're going to look after their bottom line. So we'll see how this plays out. It was just announced, and by the way, he hasn't given any real details yet. So the details are expected to be announced next week.
So when they asked him, why'd you do it? Mr. Nuance, are you ready? Buckle up. He said, because without steel and aluminum, your country's not the same. We need it. What does that mean?
Well, I think what it means is, look, there have been people in his ear about how this is a national security issue because that steel is necessary to build the weapons for our Defense Department, right? And so the people who support these high tariffs did something incredibly clever. They started running ads during the cable news shows that Trump watches. And it's been working since June, according to the New York Times. Trump has been eager to announce these types of tariffs. And on 8 separate occasions, his advisors told him, we need to think about this a little more before you do it. And finally, he became impatient and just decided today, I'm doing this.
And to be fair to Trump, he promised it during the campaign.
He did, yeah.
Right or wrong, sound policy or not, he promised it during the campaign. And so on this one, he is doing what he promised. On many of the other issues, he didn't. The carrier didn't actually keep the jobs here. So he has proposed to cut Medicare and Medicaid, which he said he wouldn't cut. I can go on and on and on. But he promised tariffs and he's giving you tariffs. So be careful what you wish for. You just got it.
Yeah. All right, we got to do one more story before we end the show. The wife of a special forces veteran is facing deportation. Her name is Elia Crawford, and she resides in Virginia. Elia Crawford is the wife of retired Sergeant First Class Bob Crawford and could be deported if a Virginia immigration court rules against her. She fled her own home country of Honduras in 1999 following Hurricane Mitch. She married Bob Crawford in 2001 when he was still on active duty. The couple has 2 sons. Now, for vets and active military members, there is something that makes it easier for their spouses to become US citizens. But since there is a deportation order in place, and since the Department of Homeland Security refuses to rescind that deportation order, they're not able to apply for the green card. This procedure is known as the parole in place that would allow for her to remain in the United States and apply for that green card. They are not allowing it. And so unfortunately, this family could be torn apart as a result of the Department of Homeland Security under the Trump administration being incredibly draconian when it comes to immigration issues.
By the way, Melania came in on a tourist visa and then worked. That is not legal. She should be deported. If they're deporting this veteran's wife, they should deport Melania Trump. Young Turks, bye-bye. All right, welcome to Rebel Headquarters. We got two excellent guests for you guys today, as always. So let's get right to it. Now joining me, Senator Connie Johnson. She is running for governor of Oklahoma. She was a state senator in Oklahoma, but only for 33 years. And she's done some amazing things in the past, including some controversial bills that I was amused by and very much in favor of. So first of all, welcome to the program. Great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
All right. Now, why come back into government after serving for 33 years and try to win this seat, especially in the middle of Oklahoma, where normally people would think it would be really difficult for a Democrat to win?
Because we have to have a Democrat try. I am not tired yet, as the saying goes. And so I'm very much looking forward to bringing the knowledge and skills that I've amassed over the last 35 years to the problems that are facing our state right now in terms of a busted budget and no new revenue streams that can be depended upon, and just ideas that are going in the wrong direction. We're last in everything good and first in everything bad. And I believe that my particular skills and interest and knowledge and vision is what Oklahoma needs right now.
So Senator Johnson, you're a trailblazer in Oklahoma. You're the first woman and the first African American to win a US Senate nomination of any major political party in Oklahoma. And then you went on to do some amazing things. One was particularly controversial on the issue of sex. We'll get back to that in a second. But I want to talk about marijuana because you were also a trailblazer on that well before everyone else was. So back in 2005, you started asking for not only to change the marijuana laws, but start talking about the prosecution of people and the need for criminal justice reform way before other people were talking about that. So what drove you on that issue?
Those were the issues affecting my community at the time. Beginning in 2000, I noticed that 60%, a high percentage of children in a relatively well-to-do neighborhood were being raised by their grandparents because of the incarceration of their parents. And I studied that, and I realized that Oklahoma's a little too conservative to go full-blown legalization. So I thought I would take an incremental approach, and actually I called my proposal the Compassionate Use Act, because we have children who are dying from Dravet syndrome, epileptic seizures. We have veterans committing suicide at tremendous rates. And we have a lot of just diseases and conditions in Oklahoma that I had studied a long time, and I knew that medical cannabis was a solution to what we were needing and versus opiates. Opioid addiction in Oklahoma is off the chart. I think it's the #1 cause of overdose deaths. But our positions on cannabis, which could actually help people cycle off of opiates and methamphetamine, our position was in the dark ages. It's still very much a part of the mindset of the war on drugs and reefer madness, if you will. And Oklahomans took that lesson to heart. Serious education has to go on here in order to get people thinking differently and believing that we have we're sitting on a gold mine. First of all, hemp, a form of cannabis, grows wild in Oklahoma. It grows between the cracks of the concrete. We used to lead the nation in rope production in World War II, and we used to pay farmers to grow it until the 1930s, when it was criminalized along with marijuana, either for medical or adult use purposes. So knowing all of those things and now realizing that our budget is busted and there are no real new sources of revenue, they're tried and true schemes that have been going on for a number of years unsuccessfully. So the marijuana issue for me is now threefold. It's about compassionate use, it's about industrial use, and it's about discontinuing incarcerating so many people at a tremendous cost to our state, because we're one of those states that have a 98% bed occupancy guarantee with private prisons. So our lawmakers are incentivized by private prisons and other private industries to pass egregious laws that are really taking a toll on the people who are least able to afford them. So it's economic, it is compassionate, and it's definitely about not ruining so many people's lives, and disproportionately Black and brown people's lives in Oklahoma.
Well, you mentioned how hemp could actually be profitable and could help the economy. I don't know if people know this. The richest president we ever had, adjusted for inflation, was a hemp farmer. His name was George Washington.
Yes.
And he was, adjusted for inflation, was even richer than Mitt Romney when Romney was running in 2012. And he did that based on hemp farming. So it's a little piece of interesting American history. But to me, yes, legalizing because it's the right thing to do. It's if you believe in freedom, yes, for the economy, but most importantly for justice, to get all those people out of prison for basically the equivalent of drinking a beer. Now, but I did want to talk about another controversial thing you did. So you've got this storied career. You've been a state senator for 33 years. You went to Ivy League school. I don't know why we keep having people from Penn graduates on. I'm also a Penn graduate. We're not planning it.
Wow,
but,
awesome.
Yes.
I'm going to alumni weekend. Come join us.
Okay, likely not because I'm too busy, but that would be awesome. It'd be great if we met there and had a beer or something else.
Andrea Mitchell.
That's right. That's right. Unfortunately, Donald Trump. Oops. So that also happened. So then in 2012, you introduced a bill to outlaw male masturbation. Why did you do that?
We were in the midst of preparing to pass the personhood bill, which not even Mississippi would do. And it was the first day of session. I had been a staff person for a number of years on the committee of the gatekeeper who kept all those negative reproductive issues from coming forth. The year he termed out, the next year there were 11 bills introduced, and it kept getting worse every year. So that on this day, the first day of session, I heard about the bill going to be heard on the first day. I wrote the amendment while I was sitting listening to the first woman governor of Oklahoma's State of the State message. And I told my colleague, I said, I'm gonna introduce this. And he said, no, you're not. I said, yes, I am. So we get to committee, and my colleague there introduced his amendment. Of course, they voted it down. We're like 5-2, Democrats to Republicans. And I took that opportunity to debate my amendment because I didn't think they were gonna let it be heard. Well, they did. They read it. The chair turned red. And basically, I was just fed up with us only addressing the woman's side of the issue when it comes to reproductive health. We never talk about the fact that it takes two to tango. And so I just made that point very poignantly that literally when a man ejaculates anywhere other than in a woman's vagina, it would be considered a violation of the personhood bill. Of course, my bill was voted down. But in the meantime, The Daily Show contacted me, no local media, but international media contacted me, national, wanting to know more about the proposal. And The Daily Show came and filmed a skit along with me and the major protagonist, who coincidentally has resigned the Senate because he was found in a hotel room with an underage boy smoking marijuana. But he really did not understand. And you have to watch it to get the point of it. But it's just interesting that people have found that funny. I was serious, even though I know biologically it has nothing to do with that. But I was one of perhaps 5 or 6 women legislators that year who drew up ironic and sardonic amendments to those kinds of proposals. And I think it worked. They released the skit the day before the bill was supposed to go to the House floor. The bill never went forward from that point. And I won't take all the credit because that year, an amazing coalition of women came together. We had women who were in favor of in vitro fertilization, who normally don't coincide or collaborate with women who favor abortion. But all groups were working together, and we had a pink wave rally. That's for my colleague, former Senator Judy Easton McIntyre, and I held up a sign that said, if I wanted the government in my vagina, I would a senator. So that made national news, but we had fun and it worked. It worked. I mean, sometimes you just have to do what you have to do.
So I want to be clear. We covered it at the time, and I thought it was brilliant. So there's three reasons why Senator Johnson's bill there made sense. Number one, if they're going to try to control women's bodies, why can't we control guys' bodies? You don't want control of guys' bodies, then don't control women's bodies. Number two, you say you're worried about potential life. It's a fair point. It's potential life, right? And number three, they base their so-called pro-life position theoretically on the Bible. Well, the Bible also says you shouldn't masturbate. It's called onanism, and it's a sin. So which one is it?
Something new.
Do you believe the Bible or don't you believe the Bible?
And back to marijuana, God created it in Genesis 1:29. And he said, this is good. So in the Bible, in the buckle of the Bible Belt state of Oklahoma, I am not ashamed to advocate for a change in our policy. I'm not ashamed to advocate for progressive policies along the same style as Bernie. I was the only Bernie superdelegate in the state of Oklahoma. And I just believe Oklahomans are ready for a bold change in direction. And I can't think of anyone more bolder than me. There are like 11 people in the race, and I'm the only woman, and I'm the only person of color.
Well, look, if you want bold, then you're going to go Connie Johnson. Okay, that one's clear. I don't think anyone can dispute that. So I want to give everybody the links here. ConnieForGovernor.com is the website. And then, of course, you got donation and volunteer links as well. And go to her website and read her policies, because she got great policies on education, healthcare, government corruption. So please check that out. And if you can volunteer and if you can donate, the links will be down in the description box if you're watching this on YouTube, and in the comment section on Facebook. Senator Connie Johnson, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right. Now, when we come back, we've got a person running for Congress in Texas. He's a Justice Democrat. He's long been involved in the progressive fight. You're going to like him a lot. And we'll find out if he's got a chance to win and what the state of his race is when we return.
All right, back on Rebel HQ. I wanted to check in on Brent Welder's race real quick. He's running in Kansas. He's a TYT member. I had asked for $20,000 extra in 1 minute. Shocked and chagrined to find out that did not happen. But let's see if can we do 30,500 by the end of the show? I think we can do that. tytkansas.com. All right. Now joining us, Derek Crow. He is a Just Democrat. He's running in Texas' 21st district. That means he's uncorrupted, no corporate PAC money. And Derek has actually been a long-time progressive fighter. So Derek, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Chang.
No problem. So you have fought in the past in terms of facing arrest, protesting the healthcare bill. You were part of the Brave New Foundation and Rethink Afghanistan, which I love. And then you had your own bookstore, right?
I did. We sold nerdy board games, like tabletop games, and had a computer rental center. It's called Mothership Books and Games. It was a lot of fun. It was a great tabletop and LAN center here in Austin, Texas.
You know what? Wait a minute. When did you start it? Because one of our hosts might have been one of your customers. Because
it was back in 2012 or so. Yeah, I'm sure that folks may have come by.
Yeah, no, it's very possible because John Idarola lived in Austin, Texas. He was getting a PhD at the University of Texas, and he's a huge board game nerd. So he probably stopped by and bought something at your store. There's
a very high probability. There's kind of a very tight-knit gaming community here in Austin, and they tend to visit all the stores, so I'm sure he came by.
Yeah, inconceivable that he wouldn't. Our nickname for him here, among 1,000 other nicknames he has, is King of the Dorks. So
awesome. We would get along, that's good.
I'm gonna tell him about you, Derek. He's gonna be your biggest contributor. And by the way, the links to contribute are down below. You should all do it if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. Okay, so then why get into politics?
Sure, well, it's really simple. I have a 3-year-old son, and when we started this race, Lamar Smith was the presumptive Republican nominee. He was one of Donald Trump's first backers. He's also the climate change denier in chief in the US Congress. And every year that my son has been alive so far has smashed a temperature record, and it's been extremely alarming to me. And to have a congressional representative here who is committed to making sure that Exxon makes a profit instead of looking after my son's future was just intolerable to me. He was also Trump's first contributor in Congress and was a very strong backer of Trump. He's the guy who said you should get your news straight from Donald Trump. And when I looked around looking for people who could beat him in this congressional cycle, I just didn't see anybody that shared my values or my passion working strongly enough to do that. So I threw my hat in the ring.
Yeah, look, I've been growing increasingly alarmed about climate change. I mean, it's a funny thing to say because we should have been alarmed all along. And I've been talking about it on the show for a long time. But man, that news that the North Pole was 38 degrees warmer than average the other day was unbelievable. And then probably a lot of people didn't see this and of course didn't make this connection, but in Greenland, there's an area that is almost never below freezing or above freezing, I should say. And they were, and for a record-breaking amount of time. And at one point, they were the same temperature as Los Angeles, where I live.
Right, like, it's terrifying. And at one point during that incident that you're talking about, the Arctic was warmer than Europe. And when we do things like that and just let them go by without taking strong congressional action, and I say when we do things like that because this is a man-made emergency that we're having here, we're setting up the destruction of everything that we would think of as the American dream or future freedom and prosperity, because our political order can't survive the pressures coming from climate change. And that's why people need to really take this seriously.
Yeah, no. I guess what I'm trying to impress upon people lately is climate change is not something that's coming. It's here.
Right.
We're in the middle of it. And so it's only gonna get worse from here on out. And then I'm afraid that when we panic, it might be a little too late, especially if the methane is released. But let's talk about the state of the race, because Lamar Smith is now retiring. So now the Democrat in the race has a much greater chance of winning, so that's good news. So then are the National Democrats getting behind you?
We haven't seen any sign of that yet. They're welcome to come play a positive role in this race if they feel like it. But what we've seen so far instead is that they've recruited an ex-Republican who doesn't live in the district to run in this race, which is extremely disappointing for folks who want to see progressive change in this district. For our part, though, we've been running since April on a really progressive message of fighting for a country that works for everybody and not just corporations and the rich, fighting for policies like Medicare for all, climate change action, raising the minimum wage, ending the student debt crisis, and fighting the stupid border wall and the attack on dreamers. And it's unfortunate that instead of getting behind a message like that, the establishment has instead decided to recruit someone who sits on the board of the Texas Association of Business, which is a group that describes itself as the most powerful conservative business lobby group in the state, someone who supports fracking, and someone who takes corporate PAC money and money from executives at places like Goldman Sachs. We are fighting, on the other hand, for a future where those forces don't get to dictate our politics. And just to tell you how important that is in this district, a minute ago we were talking about climate change. We're here in this district as well. We are along in District 21 here in Texas, Flash Flood Alley. And we've had several instances in the last decade where, because we haven't taken vigorous action on climate change, we've seen floods and fires and storms here that our own state climatologist has called very clear signals for climate change. And to have that be the situation and have national Democrats lining up behind somebody who supports fracking and yesterday's solutions to the energy crisis is really unfortunate.
But Derek, can you really claim to be the top progressive in the race when only Blue America, Democracy for America, Justice Democrats, National Nurses United, the People for Bernie Sanders, and Our Revolution has endorsed you? And I'm probably missing a couple.
I would say so, and I think that they're endorsing us because we've been a consistent, aggressive progressive since the beginning of this race. We are not going to make any apologies for that. That's the message that can heal us after 4 years of Donald Trump and after 30 years of inaction on climate change and income inequality. And we think that the dynamic at play nationally and locally argues for someone fighting for progressive values without apology, and someone who's not going to do a song and dance depending on what room they think they're in and whether it's a Republican or a Democratic crowd. That's a great way to waste the progressive energy of this race. And we've been talking to people about the math here in this race. There are only 12,000 swing voters in this district, but there are 56,000 people in this district that have voted for the Democratic nominee who tend to stay home in a midterm election. And we think motivating those people to come out and vote for progressive is the right way to go.
So I want to give the links to everybody. The website is electrow.com. That's ROWE, of course. And all these will be down below in the description box on YouTube and in the comment section on Facebook. There's a donation link. But look, there's a lot of progressives in that district. Go volunteer for Derek.
Right.
That makes a giant, giant difference. And people power, especially in these districts, have a chance of overpowering the corporate money, whether it's on the Democratic side or the Republican side.
That's absolutely right. And actually, we have last minute block walks happening this weekend. Early voting in this district ends tomorrow, and election day is on Tuesday. And folks who want to participate in the Austin or San Antonio area should absolutely sign up to do that. And if they can't sign up to volunteer in person, they should absolutely donate, because if that makes you part of the team, we're going to print literature and hand it out immediately to people with any donations that come in. So either of those things are a great way to participate in this district.
So, and if you're in Texas, you got to understand, if you don't know it, I've been saying it now for about 10 days. You can vote now. You can vote now, right now.
Right now.
Go vote. And you can vote tomorrow. And if you volunteer for Derek Crow, you can help him get out the vote both tomorrow and, of course, very important, on Election Day on Tuesday. So, Derek, we're going to cover those races right here on the Young Turks on election night. Cross our fingers, and there's 7 Just Democrats that are in those races, and you've got a great chance. I saw that you won a straw poll already in that district. So Derek's got an excellent chance of winning, but you could make all the difference. So get out there and fight for progressive values and make sure that wins instead of the corporate Democrats.
Absolutely, and I think if folks want to see progressive change in Texas, they got to do that, not just in this race, but in every race across the state. There are folks running in virtually every level of government right now in this district and in this area, and there are folks that believe what we believe. They believe what Justice Democrats and Bernie Sanders believes. And if you can find those races and volunteer from them, you'll not just drive out, turn out for that race, but for all the other people that share those values.
All right, Derek Crow, everybody, running in Texas. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ching. Take care.
Yep. All right, we're done. We are going to come back and do a post game for you guys. I want to get back into the issue of should Melania Trump be deported? I'm pretty much serious. TYTnetwork.com/join to become a member and hear that post game. We'll be right back for you guys.